As we navigate through this evolving ecosystem, I am grateful for the opportunity to hear from our partners in government and to engage with them in a constructive dialogue. Thank you again for your attendance and your participation today, and on behalf of Scotiabank, it is now my pleasure to introduce the Honourable Charles Sousa, Ontario's Minister of Finance. Welcome.
You know, I'm working on my 6th budget cycle. And I gotta tell you, this one's different. I was with some high school buddies just last week. You remember the guys from high school. And they said to me, who'd have thought it would be you? Who would have thought it would be you that would one day aspire to become the world's biggest pot dealer? My parents would be so proud. I'm not so sure about my daughter, who's sitting right here. But I guess it makes sense. I was raised in Kensington Market. Let me begin by thanking the Toronto Region Board of Trade for hosting us, and especially for your strong influence, and we're very grateful for your contributions. I'm also grateful to the head table guests and our sponsors. I'd like to acknowledge 2 of them. I'd like to acknowledge Jerry Phillips, the former MPP, former Minister of the Crown, former Chair of the Treasury Board, and most recently, over these past 5 years, he's been elevated now to be my senior intern. Jerry comes to work every day. He provides us with institutional memory, and he's so important. As is my wife, who reminds me that she likes Jerry more. And she reminds us also of why we get into politics, why it's important to give back, why it's critical to stay real, and to never, ever forget who's the boss. She reminds me of that every day. We also have another outstanding elected official who represents this very riding. Great guy who we're so proud to have, who's contributing tremendous amount of hard work, and that is MPP Han Dong for Trinity Spadina. Where are you? Give it a stand up there, Han. So today I'm pleased to share some perspectives on that and the 2017 Ontario Economic Outlook and Fiscal Review, also known as the Fall Economic Statement, which I'll table in the Legislative Assembly next week on Tuesday, November 14th. I'll confirm that we will balance the budget. In fact, last year we beat our targets by just over $3 billion yet again. And I'll confirm that we're on track to deliver balanced budgets for the next 2 years as well. The path to balance has not been an easy one. And it did not come by accident. Rather, we created a deliberate, strategic plan to diversify our economy. So today I'd like to talk about 4 things. 1, the challenges we face to recovery and the choices we made to stimulate our economy. 2, why we chose to do what we did. 3, how we achieved our goal of coming to fiscal balance. And lastly, where do we go from here? The last global recession was the worst since the Great Depression. We were in a prolonged global recession. We no longer had the luxury of relying on the United States' economic rebound. We had to pull ourselves out of the ditch without a lifeline. And we couldn't return to the old economy prior to the recession. Those jobs were gone. We knew to be competitive, we needed to change. from an old world of smokestacks to a new world of green and clean, from manual assembly lines to advanced manufacturing and high-tech factory floors, from paper to tablets. Economies around the world were sluggish, and our economy needed a boost. Unlike previous recoveries, we couldn't rely on 5% GDP growth. We needed to make bold decisions, because the people were depending on government to be activists. Some suggested that we should simply slash government services to eliminate the deficit, but we rejected that notion. Too many Ontarians were hurting and relying on these very services. So turning our backs on families who had lost their jobs was simply not an option. It's not who we are as a province. And yet there were others who wanted us to tax and spend our way out of the recession, but we rejected that too. We felt that increasing taxes at that time would be more harmful. So instead, we crafted a plan to eliminate the deficit by transforming services and by growing the economy. We did this in two ways. One, we stimulated economic growth by investing in infrastructure. And two, we seized the future by investing in our people with skills and training. First, let's talk about infrastructure. We took advantage of historically low rates to make the necessary investments to build up our aging infrastructure. Building and repairing our roads, our highways, our bridges, our transit systems, our schools, our hospitals. We knew that in the short term, these strategic investments would create more jobs. And in the long term, the economy would benefit. Businesses would better compete in a just-in-time economy to get goods to market faster and at a lower cost. And reducing congestion also improves our quality of life, helping people get home more quickly to their families. New infrastructure also attracts skilled talent and business investment from around the world, and our plan is working. These important investments have been substantial. We now have $190 billion in program investments over 13 years. It's the largest infrastructure program in our province's history. These investments support 125,000 jobs each year. The Center for Spatial Economics estimates that for every dollar that we spend on infrastructure, our GDP grows by $6. Still, there are those who oppose our plan, who argue that we should avoid investment spending. In fact, the leader of the opposition has called on the government not to embark on investments that take longer than a 4-year election cycle. So I asked them, what new hospitals in Ontario would you cancel? Which schools would you not build? Which city should go without improved transit? And the list goes on. The point being, we must think long term and take advantage of low rates today to invest in those things that matter, to make us more competitive long term. It's why we chose to invest, just as we choose to invest in our people, to prepare them for the jobs of tomorrow. We knew that having a highly skilled workforce would give us an economic advantage, enabling companies to hire the right talent for the new economy and attract foreign investors. In fact, as a result, we've been the top as a destination for foreign direct investment for the past 4 years, because companies want to come to jurisdictions where they can easily access talent, in cities and regions with high quality of life. Companies that we hope will include Amazon. Someone here from Amazon, please remind Jeff, you're always welcome here. It's a major pillar of our plan to invest in education from the ground up. We rolled out full-day kindergarten to every child, the first jurisdiction in North America to do so. It gives our kids an early boost in reading, writing, and math. And it's now proven to have lasting benefits for behavior as well. We also invested in higher learning. We revamped OSAP. For the first time, 210,000 students are attending Ontario universities and colleges for free. Anne. Because post-secondary education should not be dependent on your ability to pay, but on your ability, your desire, your willingness to learn. Imagine more young people armed with skills to compete, without punishing debt anchoring them down. It will pay greater dividends for generations to come. One of the most significant challenges facing us today is changing workplace. And as you know, we are increasing the minimum wage to help nearly 30% of workers who earn less than $15. Economists, some who are here, also remind us that nearly every minimum wage dollar earned will be directly spent. A higher minimum wage will help people get ahead and fuel our economy. We also know that fewer workers today, will stay with the same company for life. Defined benefits, company pension plans are no longer the norm. As a result, many Ontarians and Canadians are not able to save enough for retirement. So we pushed hard for CPP enhancement. It took a while. We had to force the issue by going it alone with the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. But ultimately, we were able to find consensus with other provinces and the new federal government to reach an historic agreement to enhance CPP. But let's be clear. Without Ontario's leadership, CPP enhancement would not have occurred. Greater retirement security makes a real difference in a person's life. It also makes a real difference in our economy. And during this time, we also saw opportunity to shift to a green economy. And we chose to lead instead of follow. We joined the biggest carbon market in North America and pledged to invest all the proceeds of cap and trade into reducing greenhouse gases, to drive innovation, to create jobs, and help businesses shift to the economy of the future. Growing the economy, however, was only half the battle. Being fiscally prudent was also key. We're always looking for ways to deliver services in a more effective manner. And that is what continues to make Ontario the leanest, the lowest per capita program spending government in any province in Canada. So today, our economy is strong. Our government's efforts have helped, but it is mostly due to the hard work of the people of Ontario. Make no mistake, businesses created 800,000 net new jobs since the recession, making our economy grow faster than anywhere else in Canada. For the past 3 years, we've outperformed all G7 nations, including the United States, Germany, and Japan. And independent private sector economists are projecting that Ontario's steady growth will continue. In the second quarter of 2017, growth was led by solid consumer spending, while exports also increased. Our unemployment rate at 5.9% is below the national average for 31 months in a row. And of course, we're on track to balance the budget this year and for the next 2 years. Which brings us to today. Where do we go from here? People across the province tell me they want more opportunity, especially for our children. Ontario must be visionary. We must reject calls by some born out of fear to return to the ways of the past, finding comfort in fake nostalgia. But those days are gone. We aren't going to revive dirty coal. It would be like going back to smoking cigarettes on airplanes. We must learn from the past, but let's not drive forward by looking in the rearview mirror, because that's not where those new jobs are. While others are turning inward, erecting trade barriers and closing themselves off from the rest of the world, we seek to expand international trade. The renegotiation of NAFTA is cause for concern. Ontario is critical to NAFTA, accounting for more than half of Canada's trade with the United States. So, to that end, we're meeting separately with U.S. policymakers. To date, Premier Wynne has met with 32 U.S. governors, noting that $1 billion in trade flows between the United States and Ontario every day. Over 9 million U.S. jobs are dependent on U.S.-Canada trade. We know that those governors appreciate how any disruption would be harmful to both sides. But at the same time, we must seek new trading partners. Our global trade strategy will help us diversify to other international markets by promoting Ontario businesses, by actively pursuing key industries. Ontario has become a world leader in sectors like AI and quantum technologies, attracting well-paying jobs, tech titans, and new startups. As an example, fintech, the conversion of IT and financial services, is a natural fit for Ontario. We're second largest financial services sector in North America and the second largest IT sector on the continent. The Toronto-Waterloo corridor is now considered one of the largest startup ecosystems in the world. We have a high concentration of global tech and FIs, but more importantly, we have a highly sought-after talent pool. That's why we must help them thrive, to take full advantage of these opportunities. So we formed a team of experts to advise government and help our regulators respond and embrace the demands of fintech. In fact, there's a few of them here in the audience today, and I appreciate their effort. I am pleased to announce, as part of this strategy, Ontario will establish a regulatory super sandbox and the Ontario FinTech Accelerator Office to test products, services, and business models in real markets while protecting consumers and helping firms navigate our regulatory landscape. The thing is, we cannot afford to wait and see it unfold. It is critical to be nimble in the space, in this very space, to advance in a new economy. And we must keep up or fall behind, and that includes government regulations. Point being, a government must be a collaborative partner with business. Their success is our success. About 1/3 of jobs in Ontario are in small business. They're vital to our economy. However, since the recession, some have been growing at a slower pace when compared to larger enterprises. SMEs have distinct pressures. So in next week's fall economic statement, I will be announcing a whole set of new comprehensive initiatives to help small businesses in Ontario reduce costs and become even more competitive, to help them improve their bottom line. Ontario's balanced plan is helping build a fairer and more inclusive province, but our work is not done. Despite a strong economy, too many are still facing challenges. Behind the robust economic growth, we know that people are feeling uncertain about their economic future. The rising tide has not raised all boats. Our province cannot reach its full potential, not until everyone reaches their full potential. So our government will work harder to help everyone get ahead. With a balanced budget, we'll build greater fairness by increasing key public services that matter most to our people. That's why we're helping 100,000 more kids access licensed childcare across the province over the next 5 years, doubling current capacity and helping more families. In Ontario, we're also very proud of our universal health care. It's an expression of our values of fairness, equality, and compassion. No family should have to choose between paying for medicine or putting food on the table for their kids. So we've created free pharmacare for everyone under the age of 25. OHIP Plus is the first of its kind in Canada. It's the biggest expansion of Medicare in a generation. And starting January 1, every Ontario kid will get free medications to get well and stay well, regardless of family income. We think that's fair. However, a consequence of a stronger economy means we're attracting so many more people, demanding more homes, resulting in higher prices. Buying or renting a home has become increasingly challenging. So we took action in April with our fair housing plan to temper the market, to increase supply, and bring more stability to real estate. And the results since have illustrated these measures were appropriate. Prices have come down, the market has stabilized, helping more families buy or rent a home they can afford. And another challenge facing us today is yet another demographic change. We have more than 2 million seniors in Ontario, counting Jerry Phillips. That number is expected to double over the next 25 years. Seniors want to live independent, healthy, active, safe, and socially connected lives. So the fall economic statement will include, as Premier Wynne announced just today, a new plan for seniors, where we'll create 5,000 new long-term care beds by 2022 and over 30,000 new beds over the next decade, while redeveloping yet another 30,000 more by 2025. Plus, we'll increase the number of hours of direct care per day for long-term care residents. This builds upon our last budget to provide additional supports for seniors, from creating the first ever standalone senior Minister of Senior Affairs, to lowering costs for public transit for seniors, to creating supports for those affected by dementia or requiring compassionate end-of-life care. It's incumbent upon us to be responsive to their needs. These past few years, though, have not been easy for Ontarians. But thanks to the hard work and ingenuity of the people of Ontario, we've emerged from a global recession stronger. We've emerged stronger because we've embraced change. Rather than take a passive approach, our government has partnered with business and individuals to chart a better path, to create the right conditions to grow the economy, more modern infrastructure, a world-class education system producing highly skilled talent, expanded universal health care, a competitive business environment, supports that help companies scale up, and 800,000 net new jobs. Our plan is working. Our economy is strong and it's growing. But change is not done with us, and we're not done with change. So we'll continue to play an active role. Next week, I will introduce new measures to invest in our economy, transform government services, support seniors, and promote small business. All of which are afforded because we take a balanced approach, delivering a balanced budget so that we can continue to invest in what matters most to the people of Ontario: fairness and opportunity for all. Thank you very much for this time. I think the tough questions are yet to come. Where's Josh?
Thank you, Minister Sousa, for sharing your economic vision for the province of Ontario. It's one, as we know, that will be of increasing interest to Ontarians in the coming year. I was interested to hear you say, how time flies, that this is your 6th budget and that it's different. So that's amazing. But that you've made choices, and I think that's what's important, and they are paying off. Investments in infrastructure and skills and training are key, and the fact the intersection of these two is so critical, because we won't be able to complete the infrastructure if the skilled labor force isn't there to complete it. I also appreciated that your government is thinking long-term, that it is about being visionary, not going back. And I think the many examples you gave us about how our government will be a collaborative partner are key. So thank you very much for that. So now, as you said, the tough questions are to come. So I would like to invite Josh Wingrove, reporter from Bloomberg News, up to the stage for a conversation with the minister. Welcome, Josh, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that. We'll try to keep it brief. You're, of course, the first minister ever who's run a little over time. So that never happens in politics. Now,
that would mean less questions.
Yeah, funny how that always works out. I want to ask you a little bit about the balanced budget pledge. You know, Ontario has a balanced budget on paper, but still a pretty substantial borrowing requirement. It's something like $94 billion over the next 3 years. Trudeau's catching all kinds of flack in Ottawa, has basically the same thing with his federal deficits. If the budget is not really balanced, how exposed are you to the rising rate environment right now? That's going to undercut the bottom line.
The whole point of your first ability to manage debt is to balance the budget. Can you guys hear me okay? And what we have is a net debt to GDP of around 37, 38%, and it's tapering down because we're growing the economy. We are also taking advantage of low rate environment and locking in those borrowings for long term. So we're trying to minimize the interest rate risk. In fact, over $300 million more were saved this year alone because of lower expectations of borrowing and the lower cost of rates, which is enabling us to take advantage of that system. In fact, today, interest on our costs on our budget is about 8% compared to what it was 15 and 16% just 20 years ago and 10 years ago. So our ability to borrow is there, and it's what you borrow for. You don't want to borrow to cover your operating costs. You want to borrow to invest in capital that makes us competitive long term and then increases returns and increases our economy, which then continues to lower overall debt to GDP. Nowhere in time has the province of Ontario actually lowered its borrowings. Had it done so, it would hamper the growth of our economy. Our economy now is $800 billion. The budget is around $150 billion a year. So our ability to manage within that is what's important, and borrowings is a consequence of enabling us to be successful. You don't want to pass on the burden of debt to future generations. You want to pass on the competitiveness as a legacy for our future generation. And that's why we're investing heavily in infrastructure, in roads, bridges, and things that make us competitive.
But we have had 2 rate hikes this year. Governor Poloz is giving a speech about an hour. You know, this could have a substantial impact on Ontario's bottom line. It sounds like you're saying that, listen, the debt ratio is our
The fluctuation in interest rates, again, is a reflection of the strengthening of our economy and our ability to manage. But as I've said, we actually have about $30 billion in liquid reserves. Our borrowing for this year is now at about 90%, I believe. And so our ability to weather any other economic conditions or interest rates, we have flexibility in the system because we've accommodated for it.
You mentioned pot off the top. The feds, as you know, are sort of skipping along merrily down this path. Ontario's going with them. They've offered 50% of the revenue from excise taxes. What do you say to that?
It's not enough, right? I'm working alongside my counterparts in the other provinces. We've had discussions with the federal government. We're going to be having our federal, provincial, territorial meeting in the coming weeks. And part of that discussion will be a more equitable sharing of revenue to accommodate the upfront costs that provinces are putting in, the need to support enforcement, the ability to make those transformations. We have to go after the illicit market as well. So we need to collaborate with the federal government to determine that the proper sharing formula is there. And so we anticipate that will be either that or the federal government assumes all the costs, because they're not. There's no costs involved for them. We're bearing those costs. We've got to find greater recovery for
Why does it cost more to enforce something legal when it's illegal now? How is it costing more?
Well, because it's illegal now, and that illegality has to be stopped. And you still need to establish storefronts. You still need to come forward with an online delivery system. You have a subsidiary organization of the LCBO, and there are members here in the audience as well. That has to be established. That online delivery will be available on the day of the launch, and it'll be available to every Ontarian in the province. We need to have that prepared and be ready for that.
Are you hosting a party?
Pardon me?
You're going to host a party that day?
Josh, you'll get your supply, don't worry.
Thanks, Minister. You mentioned housing as well, the plan to stabilize, you think it's worked. We're down to maybe 6% year-over-year growth rather than the 33 we were seeing not too long ago. Are you comfortable at that level?
Well, is the
work done?
is the public comfortable? Because in the end, there was a lot of anxiety with the explosive year-over-year growth. As you said, 30%. In some pockets, it was even 40%. And the worry that so many had was, are we going to have an instability in the marketplace? Developers were calling, saying, man, we're doing great. We're selling out. But their worry was the sustainability of the marketplace. My first budget, and every other budget I've done since, the first question I asked is about why is Ontario's real estate market so strong? Whereas everywhere else, they've thrown the keys back to their banks and walked away from dropping prices and tremendous amount of equity lost in those families. It hasn't happened in Ontario. In fact, the opposite has occurred. And that is a sign of our growing economy and the strength and the confidence that people have in Ontario. But we were also cautious about the sustainability and the notion that a bubble was going to, they always talk about a soft landing. The worry is a hard landing. We saw that in the 1980s and early 90s. So we needed to take those measures, and there was 16 measures that were comprehensive in scope to temper the psychology of people buying homes, as well as remove some of the activities, the speculators that were in the system, basically jumping the queue, buying up a lot of paper, never buying the home though, and crowding out families that really wanted to get into the marketplace, flipping them, and now we're working with the CRA to determine that they are actually reporting that as income as opposed to capital gains, and those are the kind of things we've taken, and that's tempered the mood some, but the market is still up. It's just not as high, and it's enabling people to have more confidence in buying and renting, because rent controls was also something that we put in place.
So is this a good time to buy?
I'll have a glass of water.
Yeah. You mentioned I think you call it a super sandbox.
Yeah.
What the heck is that?
So I'm really excited about the conversion and the talent that we have in this region. I've met with a lot of young people, well-educated, well-prepared, and eager to do more in the IT space and in the fintech space. And Ontario is a great place to have this, right? We got the IT sector, we got the financial services sector, we got Scotiabank talking about the factory. It's a fintech hub of sorts, enabling the community to embrace this change and be prepared. If we don't address it, we'll be caught behind. And our major banks recognize this all too well because they see the evolution. Cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and the IPOs that are taking place right now. We're working closely with the Ontario Securities Commission to enable us to be nimble, be responsive to this, protect consumers all the while. But it's important for us to be at the forefront. And they're demanding and pressing the envelope, and we just got to be prepared for what's coming. And instead of waiting for it, we're asking these very individuals that are in the fintech space to work alongside our regulatory bodies to make sure that we get it right and enable that community to evolve, grow, and we want to be at the forefront. We want Ontario to nurture the space because it's all over the world.
I think a lot of people in this room would say if you want to help them navigate the regulatory environment, ease the regulatory environment. We've had comments in the last few months from the Chamber, from CFIB, from the Business Council, all saying that for one reason or another, business confidence and the outlook is fading. People say there's too much red tape, too much uncertainty. What do you say to that? What do you say to people say it's getting less and less worth to even bother doing business in Ontario?
So they're absolutely right. We need to find a way to reduce red tape, make it more attractive for businesses to invest, and have confidence in the system that we will support them. As I said, I'm going to have a lot of measures coming out in the coming week, but we've already tried to do some red tape initiatives to reduce those costs. But at the same time, while I'm kind of blowing up a regulatory system, I got Financial Services Regulatory Authority, a new authority that's coming in to replace FSCO. It's more arm's length of government to take away that political risk. It'll operate more like the Ontario Securities Commission, but it's going to be very much around consumer focus, business focus, to enable us to get it right. And that
responsive nature of the regulatory body is important. There's this notion of prohibition in regulatory terms in Ontario, whereas in the United States it's seen as permissible. But we have to find that right balance because we want to protect individuals too. So I'm encouraged by the engagement. We need to foster and reduce red tape. We need to make our companies competitive. In the end, that's what matters. But even still, Ontario has more startups than anywhere else in Canada. We got more influx of foreign direct investment in this province, in this jurisdiction, that outpaces the rest of North America. So we are doing things that are attracting business. We have low unemployment. There is greater confidence because inventories and receivable working capital accounts are now rising. Businesses are investing. But we must always foster ways to make it better.
You mentioned the U.S. measures, and you made an allusion in your speech to people sort of false nostalgia. It seemed to be an allusion to President Trump, but maybe you won't bite at that. But what would you do if U.S. tax reform measures go forward? Do you think that undercuts Ontario's competitiveness? You got a president who is trying to make it a lot more attractive for Ontario businesses to move to south of the border.
Yeah, so the U.S. tax system is much more expensive than it is in Ontario. So in some respects, they're playing catch up to us. We have some of the lowest taxes, corporate income taxes in North America and in the OECD.
But higher wages, higher hydro, carbon price. There's a lot of things that add on.
Yeah, and we are taking steps to reduce some of those rates to make business competitive. We are looking at reduction in red tape. But what is most important to some of these businesses and why they choose to come here is because we got the talent and the skills to enable them to do so. I mean, the investments, and we have strategic programs to supplement and attract some of those companies to come this way. We have a judicial system that has tremendous confidence. You got universal health care and public education, so families can have that benefit too. Ontarians, Canadians, we're great people. Everybody wants to be part of our family.
So it's not a race to the bottom with Trump.
It can't be a race to the bottom. And when you talk about going back in time, what I hear is people saying, I want low-paying jobs on assembly lines with cheap energy and smokestacks. Like, we're never going to compete in that space. You're never going to
built its economy on that.
It's tough. So what you compete is on value-added initiatives, things that makes us a necessary part of that value chain. And that's what we're doing. And as I said, our exports are increasing. We got people here from the Manufacturers Association. Their memberships are growing because it's essential for us to broaden and diversify our economy in other sectors that are needed. And it's that diversified economy that also enables us to weather commodity shocks. Because if all we're going to invest is in resources and tier first level manufacturing, we're never going to be able to really grow in the added space where it's high paying jobs, high valued resources, and attraction of people to come here. And Ontario is achieving that.
Let me, in closing, because I want to make sure we don't run too over, you mentioned NAFTA. How do you think the talks are going? And do you think the federal government is playing this the right way so far?
So we're concerned. I think all of us are. We recognize the challenges that will affect Ontario and Canada. It'll affect the United States too. So instead of getting into the rhetoric up top, we're actually going to subnational jurisdictions to talk to them about what this means to them. 26 U.S. states rely on Ontario for trade surpluses. That is important for them to appreciate and understand. It's important for us, certainly. But it's also necessary now for us to look beyond North America for more export and more trade opportunities. I am concerned about the discussions and the level. We are always worried about some bilateral agreements with softwood lumber and agriculture and so forth. We'll deal with that. In the end, we'll continue to be traders and free traders, and we'll continue to have relationships with the United States. How it'll look in the coming months and years, we'll see. But I'm confident that we'll always have strong relationships because businesses demand it.
Well, I was kicking myself today because I figured my tie was maybe a little too Tory blue, and it was a mistake. You got one on too. Is there anything you want to tell us also?
Baby blue.
Baby blue. Good. Well,
listen, what's important, and my old man, when he came to Canada And I remember this. I got to tell you, the budget, the work I do is no different than the work he aspired to do when he first came here in 1953. He said there's room for everyone to compete and do business, room for everyone to learn, and more importantly, room for everyone to help each other. The budget, the plan, is all about attracting new investment, foreign direct investment, new people, and support our systems to attract those businesses. It's all about investing heavily in our education system and post-secondary and in kindergarten, enabling all our people to be at their best so that they can compete in a new environment. And it's also about giving back, right? Retirement security, enabling us to perform the things that matter to people, a social services program that they rely upon. That makes us a more compassionate society. So my old man would say out of Kensington Market, never spend, if you only make 10, don't spend 12. In fact, only spend 8, sock away a couple. And never think about it. Just keep it investing and make that investment work for you. But it's okay to borrow, he would say, as long as you're borrowing to make your businesses more attractive, to earn more money with other people's money more cheaply. And if you are using a charge, if you are buying stuff, never borrow for your operating or to put your expenses. But never borrow expensively. Like know your basis. Never use your credit card, for example, as a credit card. Use it as a charge card. Pay it off monthly. And he goes, I got money for free for 30 days. So his whole premise is based upon what I've got in this budget and the other budgets I've had before me. So I say to you and I say to others, our society is built by people like him, by people like you. And in the end, it's you that makes our economy grow and prosper. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for spending the time. Appreciate it.